Good evening. Day 4, put yourself into a better place. I'm Robert Gibbons, and it's a pleasure to be in your virtual company. Tonight, I'd like to just say thank you to all the people that have reached out to me, that have given me words of encouragement, just to say hello, just to check in, just to call, just to say we're thinking about you. It means a lot in a time like this. I would like to honor my mother, Dorothy, my father, Robert, my grandmothers, Versi and Maddie, and also my grandfathers, Jethro and Sammy. I pulled 3 chapbooks off my shelf tonight to read to you and to continue the legacy of the written word and spoken word in poetry during National Poetry Month. Thank you to my friends that have connected me to the 3030 this month. That's Ed and JP and Keisha, and also Laura Tucker and Cynthia Hiltz and Amber Atia. Thank you so much for continuing to inspire me to write every day. And also Golda Solomon. I would like to start off with a chapbook. My first chapbook is by a poet by the name of Merwin Taylor, and his book is called An Island of His Own. An Island of His Own. Overcrowded by Merwin Taylor. Sometimes the streets just fill up and overflow with people while I wait for an empty sidewalk without some captured kid riding in my midsection. There is no place sometimes to avoid the world. Evelyn sings her heart outside my window real pretty, which sets me up real good for one sad story after another. Seems like a line formed behind her. It wouldn't matter if the land were not so littered. And when you say the country has lots and lots of space, I count the many silken hairs, the kernels on the cobs and cobs of corn. An Island of His Own by Merwin Taylor. Thank you, Merwin, for blessing us tonight. The next book I pulled, chapbook that I pulled off my shelf was The Worshipful Company of Fletchers by James Tate. And James Tate is a very well-known poet. He won the National Book Award in 1994. And truly, if you engage with James Tate, he is a remarkable poet. And so this poem by James Tate is called A Missed Opportunity by James Tate. A word sits on the kitchen counter next to the pitcher of cream with its blue corn flour bent. Perhaps a guest left it in a hurry, or as a tip for good service, or as a fist against some imagined insult, or it fell with some old plaster from the ceiling, a word, some antediluvian helpmate, hushed up. It picked itself up from the floor, brushed itself off, and somehow scratched its way up the cupboards. It appears to be a word of considerable strength and even significance, but I can't bring myself to look into its gaze. The cornflowers are pointing towards the cookies not far away. An expert could be called to diffuse the word, but it is Sunday, and they are still sleeping or singing, and besides that, the word seems to have moved again on its own, and now it appears warm and welcoming. It throbs with life and a sincere desire to understand me. It looks slightly puzzled and hurt, as though I take a step towards it. I hold out my hand. Friend, I say, But it is shrinking. It is going away to its old home in the familiar, cold dark of the human parking lot. The Worshipful Company of Fletchers by James Tate. Thank you, James, for blessing us tonight. The last poetry chapbook, and a chapbook again, it can be between 10 to 15 poems or 15 to 25 poems. It's a small compendium of the poet's work, a chapbook. And so I pulled 3 chapbooks tonight for you. I first started off with the chapbook of Merwin Taylor, An Island of Its Own. The chapbook of James Tate, A Worshipful Company of Fletchers. And the third chapbook is by a poet, a well-known poet here in New York by the name of Kathleen Ossip, The Cold War. And I'm going to read just one page of Kathleen's poem document. It's a very long poem, and I'm just going to read the first page of it so you can get an idea of Kathleen's work document. Woke up with the start at 3 o'clock and decided to write a paper and felt like I was dying and kept things in their proper perspective, since the media has been the most horrifying experience of my life. For with predictions of the past 2 nights, I chemical, nuclear, biologically warfared on our turf. Very, very sick. I am a retired asshole, a military weapons expert. Physically or mentally, I want to kill. Lesson number 1. In a good person, there was a series of nerve gas attacks. How worthy, but it's all less than 10% of an overpowering desire to be one with someone. The injured were better in the sick shame of it in a few hours. The machoism of the injured died. Children playing grown up on 60 Minutes. Well, to be quite frank, 1 drop of nerve gas could kill 1,000 people. A little clerk in a lingerie boutique was theoretical. Yucks of laughter, period cramps snaking around my gut. Forget everything that disturbs you. Most humans have seen on TV, in the movies, or read in a novel about this stuff. A wave of intense, well read that sentence again out loud. The last chapbook for tonight, The Cold War by Kathleen Ossip. Last night, I gave a tribute to my niece, Leah, for her birthday, and also honored the nation's children. And I didn't get a chance to read one more book for children, since children are also in quarantine and exile. For the first time in our history, they have had to stay home in many states for the rest of the school year. And so one book in particular that I decided to read last night and didn't get a chance was a book called Pablo Neruda, The Poet of the People. And I just want to read Neruda's book, and it will be on this day 4, Put Yourself in a Better Place. Pablo Neruda, by Monica Brown, illustrated by Julie Pashkis. Pablo Neruda, the poet for the people. Once, there was a little boy named Naphtali who loved wild things wildly and quiet things quietly. For the moment he could talk, Naphtali surrounded himself with words that whirled and swirled, just like the river that ran near his home in Chile. Naphtali loved to play in the forest, ride horseback, and swim in the river with his friends. Naphtali's father was a train conductor, and sometimes he would take his son with him on the train. Whenever the train made a stop, Naphtali would run off into the forest to search for beetles, bird eggs, and tall ferns that dripped water like tears. Naphtali wasn't very good at soccer or at throwing acorns like his friends, but he looked to read and discover magic between the pages of books. A very special teacher named Gabriella Mistral gave him a wonderful book from a faraway place, and Naphtali decided that he wanted to be a writer too. When he was a teenager, Naphtali changed his name to Pablo Neruda and began publishing his poems. He always wrote in green ink, the color of the ferns in the forest and the grass beneath his feet. Pablo moved into the big city of Santiago and met other writers, and together Pablo and his friends walked the streets wearing great black capes and tall hats, and they talked about books and shared their poems with all who would listen. Pablo wrote poems about things he loved, things made by his artist friends, things found at the marketplace, and things he saw in nature. He wrote about scissors and thimbles and chairs and rings. He wrote about buttons and feathers and shoes and hats. He wrote about velvet cloths, the color of the sea. Pablo loved opposites, so he wrote about fire and rain and spring and fall. In the streets and with his friends, Pablo saw joy and sadness, so he wrote about them both. Pablo loved the stones of Chile. He wrote about stones rolled by the waves onto the beach and stones polished by the sand and salt. He wrote about stories tumbling down the mountaintop and stones in the hand of the stone cutters. Pablo loved the sea and the feel of the sand beneath his feet. He loved walking along the beach near his home in Chile. He found starfish and seaweed and red crab and green water. He saw dolphins playing in the surf and rusty anchors washed ashore. Pablo wrote about the children who played in the sea foam and the sand, skipping stone and chasing waves. He wanted each child to share in Chile's wealth and hope. Pablo had many homes. One was in Spain, half a world away. This home was called the House of Flowers because of the red flowers blooming from every corner. The House of Flowers was always filled with dogs and people young and old. Because above all things and above all words, Pablo loved people. Pablo loved mothers and fathers, poets and artists, children and neighbors, and his many friends around the world. He opened his arms to them all. When Pablo saw the coal miners working dangerous jobs for little money, he was angry. And when he saw that they were cold and hungry and sick, he decided to share their story. He joined those who fought for justice and wrote poems to honor all workers who struggled for freedom. Even when his poems made leaders angry, he would not be silenced because he was a poet of the people. When soldiers came to get him, Pablo hid in the homes of friends and then escaped on a horse over the mountains of Chile. Pablo Neruda was brave. He wasn't afraid to share the story of Chile with the world. Pablo's voice was heard across nations and oceans. From his poems grew flowers of hope and dreams of peace. The beautiful picture of Pablo Neruda. Pablo Neruda, the poet of the people. Thank you, Monica Brown and Julie Pashkis, for this wonderful children's book, Pablo Neruda, Poets of the People. Thank you so much for your attention to me tonight. Day 4 of Put Yourself into a Better Place. And we can make this. We will win. Thank you.